Hey, welcome back from lunch, everyone. Hope everyone had a great meal today. Looking at the setup here, we will know that there's no discussion coming right up. But before that, let me just give a brief introduction about this. Firstly, we have Hsien, she's over there. Hsien, CEO of Astreem Consulting, Private Ltd and TreeAMS, and a master franchisee in the Philippines market for seriously addictive. Hsien believes that there is no greater satisfaction collaborating with entrepreneurs to develop successful brand growth, and this is what motivates her to constantly look for novel solutions. Together with a group of professionals, she also created TreeAMS, a complete franchise management system that aims to assist businesses in making long-term improvements to their productivity, scalability, and profitability. Secondly, we have Gerhard. We have Gerhard, Director of Brotzeit International. He first stepped foot in Asia in 2004. Following his arrival in Asia, he has operated, owned, and scaled food service businesses in Singapore, Vietnam, and China, opening more than 25 F&B locations and direct market entry missions around the region. He has been driving Brotzeit International and the company's global expansion strategies in 2019. And finally, we have Bernard, the co-founder of director of KC Group, who is also our moderator for this panel discussion. The KC Group was founded in 2007 and has since grown to become one of Singapore's fastest growing hair and beauty groups. Some of the hair and beauty salons under KC Group include KC, K-Cut, People's Barber, and Abujam Hair Studio, just to name a few. So let's put our hands together and welcome Hsien, Gerhard, and Bernard.
Hi, good afternoon. Happy to be here in this moderation. I think we are a smaller group after lunch. So, we are looking for this, right? So when I was asked to do this moderation, it's also because this year we are fortunate that we are opening up for streets markets early September to a non-exclusive arrangement, multi-unit arrangement with a franchise partner. So maybe let me ask to share about the lessons and experience before we ask a question.
Okay, as was introduced earlier, Hsien Naidu. First business in franchising was Astreem Consulting. Astreem Consulting is a franchise consulting firm that helps franchise laws grow businesses in Singapore and into the region and the countries that we specialize in Malaysia, Philippines, and Indonesia, where we have our own business there as well. Because of the work that we've been doing in franchising, I had the good fortune to meet Mrs. Lanyi. Mrs. Lanyi is the founding, I would say, the godfather of franchising in the Philippines. And I had the good fortune to partner up with him a good many years ago, and then that's when Chris and I also got to know each other better. Then we also together partnered to grow and build the company called Franchise. Yes, and so New Franchise is the largest franchise managing company that helps a lot of local Filipino franchises grow one to many. And like earlier, if you were here, you would have seen Chris done a lot of the brand that we booked. Those are the companies that we are building, and I was fortunate enough to be there for the 20th anniversary of this year. And also heartened to see that they have things like they give out awards, but they give out awards to franchisees that have 50, they call it 50 club, which means that they have these and above. They have the 100 club members. the franchise stores have more than 100 franchisees. And then we have the 500 club award winners as well. That means that they have more than 500 franchisees. And I think that is really a big bustling market for franchising for all of those of you who actually are intending to get into franchising. Then Philippines is definitely a very exciting country to explore, because 500 outlets in one country is not unreal. As you can see, there are actually brands that we work with that have over 1,000 outlets as well. So for those of you who stood out and said that who released that day after the 3,000 mark, congratulations, you are already definitely fantastic. Keep going. So that's what we do as Astreem Consulting. Of course, potentially a hospital and franchise platform that actually helps brands scale operationally. But more importantly was my work with Chris in New Franchise, where we actually managed to really open our eyes as a Singaporean. I have to tell you that opening 18 outlets in Singapore is like, that's a lot of difference. And if you go to like 30, it's like, fantastic, you've got 30 outlets in Singapore. But to be able to step to a country like this and realize that 30 outlets is good, but 300 outlets is 3,000 outlets is wow, and that's in one country. And that really put a new perspective, and I put on immediate new glasses, magnifying glasses that actually show the potential of what Singaporean brand can be outside the shores of Singapore. And then, of course, with the success of all the clients that we serve, I started to realize that, hey, there's so many franchisees here, and I have so many franchisors that I work with. Why don't I try to become a master franchisee so that, as a consultant, I learn what is the experience that master franchisees experience when they start building their brands, so that when I work with the clients and work with, we have better insights into the local market. So that's when one of the brands that we're working with called seriously Addictive map, and it's about the Singapore map. And we are as Singaporeans, we are very famous for our Singapore map, and that's when I took on that franchise. And that's when I became the master franchisee of seriously Addictive map. And that's when I thought, this is time to leverage the network that the franchise has with a huge marketing base. And I have to say that because of Facebook, because of the huge participation on social media, it can actually reach a lot of single unit franchisees, and the work with new franchise was also very powerful as we started our franchise business so that was my beginning of understanding this market. And I have to say, humbly, as a consultant, I'm good at consulting. We do a lot of desktop research, we do a lot of interviews and stuff like that, so we have a lot of information. But guess what? None of that prepared me for the actual on-the-ground opening of actual physical outlets, right? So between the first outlet and now and the 50th outlet we learned a lot. So I hope you will share. Ready to begin.
Gerhard is my name. I head Brotzeit International. It's a German restaurant and beer bar that we established in Singapore back in 2006. Our first outlet in Sydney, most of you would know. We operate 4 restaurants, typically 5, for another location here in Singapore that we cooperate on. And everything outside of Singapore is operated by the company that I'm heading. That is the franchise part of our business. Everything outside of Singapore is franchise. But we have expanded since 2010 when we first started to franchise the brand. We started with Malaysia, Saigon, Vietnam, into Perth, to Beijing, to South China, and to the Philippines, to Hong Kong. Opened somewhere north of 30 outlets in Singapore and the region over the past 17 years. And speaking of the Philippines, that was one of our first markets before my time with Brotzeit back in 2012. The company expanded to the Philippines and has been doing fairly solid business there since. To manage the expectations of this kind of franchise, we're not talking about 500, 3,000 outlets. We have opened 5 in the Philippines over the last 10 years or 11, and hope to grow it to a level of 8, 9, or so. It's about it can give us.
Thanks for sharing. So just now I had a chat with Gerhard about business in the Philippines. So one of the things we hear is this company actually signed a master franchise agreement many years ago, in fact before his time. And then he felt that if the master franchise agreement wasn't made this way, the company would have more free hands to actually expand even faster. And maybe you can share a bit about that.
Yeah. In fact, it's not a master franchise agreement. That would have actually been smart in retrospect. It's an area development. So what we don't do is single unit franchise agreements where you give us a franchise license to an individual company, or what I like to call a mama papa team that likes to open up a single restaurant. That's never good in our business because you're dealing with so many individual parties on the one hand, and when starting out in a new market, dealing with a franchisee that owns a single license, and the economics of going there frequently for audits and trainings, etc., just don't work out. So what we've done always was to give away an area development agreement, but that area could, depending on the market, be either a city or a part of the country. In the case of China, for instance, we had split it into north part and south part. In the case of Australia, we considered that area Western Australia. In the case of Saigon, we called it Saigon. In the case of Manila, to the point, we gave it to for the entire Philippines. So I think this is one critical point one would have to be very considerate about. Who am I giving such a large area to, and what do I want from him in terms of a development schedule in return? So for us, we asked for only 3 outlets. In retrospect, I think one should have asked for 6, 8, 9, 10 outlets. The other alternative would have been to actually give a master franchise, which would now allow our current partner doesn't have the appetite for 8, 9, 10 outlets, obviously after 10 years, or at least not fast enough, could sub-franchise and have others. But we didn't choose to do that. So these are certainly frank learnings. I'm sharing with you the mistakes that you would make into this.
Thanks. Yeah, because that is definitely a key consideration on franchise brand beyond Singapore. So when we had our conversation with our non-exclusive multi-unit franchise partner, one of the things that the partner asked of us is, can I have the master? Because are we investing a lot of resources to build your brand? This brand is what you need. So if I want the master, why don't we invest that marketing or PR campaigns build this brand eventually that may not be owned by him, right? So these are all very valid considerations to consider. Maybe we can hear from Hsien. How do you manage your so many franchisees as a single unit, or you have certain areas as well?
Okay, so the very clear distinction Gerhard is the fact that he's brand owner, and I'm speaking to you from the perspective of a master franchisee. In our case, we took the master franchisee position because we could then have the rights to exactly do that, what you were talking about, building a network of franchises. So that was my main mission, and that was to help the franchisor build their brand in the region. And so marketing the brand was one of our main responsibilities and biggest challenge, because we don't get into the market with relatively. But as a master franchisee, we actually are like a mini franchisor, which means that the franchisor has trained us so that we have to then set up a team. So to be clear, as a master franchisee at this role, I have an entire team that actually does that. That I have a GM, and then I have a marketing team, my assistant, accountant, I have a sales manager, I have a team of 6, 7, sometimes 8 on my team to actually manage that. So from a marketing perspective, we work with our franchisor every year, and our franchisor will say, okay, for this campaign, you need to dedicate this amount of the revenue to marketing. But then in some cases, they will support us and sponsor us in areas of marketing that they think that they can use from our development for the region. So they will actually contribute to like video productions, or like we have influencers come in, stuff like that. So some of the marketing can be done locally by us with that permission, and there will be some marketing that is done in conjunction with the franchisor, because they will give us a marketing fund, produce the work in conjunction.
Okay, very good. Thank you for sharing. So one of the very questions that linger in our heads right before we went into a new market is how much should you price our franchise? Because in Singapore we can price $80, right? And but when we go overseas, the $8 seems too much because their GDP per capita, their annual income, it's a lot smaller. So how then you decide how much to price your franchisee in this case, or area development?
Well, we didn't sort of localize our fees to the fees. We charge us very small one-time fee per outlet. Part of it was
It's relative, right?
it's $30,000 for the area development agreement per metered outlet. So in my example of us giving away minimum three outlets in an area development agreement, typically our partners start off with $90,000, roughly 125,000 Singapore dollars. That's at the point of formation of the partnership, and then we charge $50,000 for each of the single unit franchise agreements, which we form as and when the outlets open. So that is something that any business from Australia to Beijing had to come up with to get started. Then we charge 5% of sales. So when it comes to a percentage of sales, there is no gap between Singapore and the Philippines. That's sales, right? That's all.
Okay, so for me, because I wear so many hats, right? So SAM is a brand that we built as a franchise from the beginning, and of course we grew SAM to the region. And of course, the Philippines was such an awkward concern. I had to get the master franchise because I was very reasonable, because so it depends on a franchisor and how they see the market. So our franchisor saw that the master franchisee is not significant. I think we probably pay something say for the whole 10 years or more. What happens is the fact that you know, and during lunch, a lot of people asking about strategy. I think that the important part is to understand where the money is. Is the money upfront? Is the money in the supplies? Is the money in the royalties? So one of the things about education is the fact that the money may not come from like products and services. It comes from the rendering of the class, the classes that we conduct and the students that we take on. And so royalties in education tends to be a lot higher than in F&B, for instance. So our royalties are pretty high. I mean, ranges around 20%. That means for every $100 we get from the student, we have to consider 20% royalties from the franchisee because we are master, right? So we charge a 20% royalties on the purchase students. And then we split that royalty with our franchisor. And actually, over time, that royalty is a lot more significant than whatever we charge upfront. So it really depends on how your business model is and how your strategy is. Going into marketing, you know where that what your long-term strategy is.
Very good. So you as a master franchisor of FBN Philippines, how much can you price the initial franchise fee for the franchisee?
Okay, so that's a very, very tricky question. Because earlier you would have seen credit flash around the country, right? So there's Manila, right? So depending on the type of franchising, some people will charge for Metro, for Manila a fee. But then because the rest of the Philippines isn't, the GDP might not be as high as Manila, you might actually have a strategy. I know of some franchisors that charge less for Metro Manila and more for the other country, the other parts of Manila because they travel and the cost of supporting franchisees higher. So that's one approach. Our approach is we decided to charge a certain fee for Manila, but outside of Manila, we actually charge less. The franchise fees for the franchisees outside of Manila charge about 30% less than in Manila. And because of that strategy, because Manila is pretty, Philippines is pretty big, we actually have an equal number of franchisees in the provinces as we do in Manila.
Very good, very good. So I mean, culturally you're very different from Philippines. So what are some of the challenges you face managing franchisees?
You're right. They are culturally different, but strangely, we've not had many challenges with Filipinos. In fact, they're my favorite franchises. The Filipinos are very much used to the franchise idea, so the concept of franchising. If you look around in Manila, you find loads of F&B franchises. Those are the ones that I notice more than education. So, I suppose that because of the closeness and historical closeness to the US. So, for the Filipinos, this is very much a learned process. Franchise business, if they want a franchise, so if they take a franchise, they want it from A to Z with everything that comes with it. So, if I compare this to other markets, we have the least issues in the Philippines with franchisees doing things we don't want them to do. Be it adding unapproved beverages and dishes, etc. So they follow by the book, but then also in return they ask for the services that we had promised to also be delivered by the book as well.
Very good, thank you.
On a lot of challenges.
Because you manage many your single unit franchises.
Yes, earlier you would have heard I say I have people. So one of the things that we do agree is that in the Philippines, there are people who build their empires on the franchising as a wealth building vehicle. So people understand that franchising works. So a lot of people aspire to be franchisees. The other thing is that they do respect the framework of franchising, which means that they do respect the intellectual property. They do understand that they need to act as franchisees. So they, by and large, that they are better to manage as franchisees than franchisees individuals. So because this is in other parts of Asia, and there the interpretation of franchising is a lot. So of course it depends on who you ask. If you ask Christopher, he will tell you that, oh yes, franchising are difficult to manage and all that. But that's only because he's had the luxury of working in the Philippines, where people generally are very compliant towards franchise regulations. Step outside of that, a lot of the other Southeast Asian countries have different interpretation of franchising is. So in our company, the biggest thing that we have is not the onboarding, because franchisees come from a training. It's not about compliance, because by and large they do follow your rules and regulations. And if you hold a franchise conference, everybody shows up. It's not like most people will be busy in other countries. In the Philippines, people take it very seriously. You give them franchise conditions and bonds, scorecards. They actually follow, and they will participate and contribute actively. So that's very good. But what happens is that the payment of the franchise royalties is sometimes a little bit more difficult than getting her to comply, because you actually need to be on top of it very frequently to be actively engaging them. But what I also noticed is that the flip side is that you can actually ask them for it. They are willing to negotiate and work with you to get there. So it might take longer, but if you put your effort into it, you will get it. It's not like some other countries where you put in all the effort, you just get never find them again. So I think that's a good side.
Glad to hear that. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, one of the main challenge for bringing brand foreign country is that they learn all your know-how, and then they duplicate something else and call it something very similar, right? So I'm glad to hear that people are very compliant and respectful of the culture of the country. Okay, so coming to that, right? Next question. Could you share insights on the state of Philippines economy? Maybe I did some research about Philippines and understand that the new president, Bambang Marcos, is very pro FDI, and in fact, the economy is growing very fast. And how it might impact your growth perspective, as you move forward.
Our outlets have been doing significantly better in recent years. Actually, the post-COVID phase nearly doubled our sales. I'm not sure if that's got to do with the economic development or simply some change in consumer behavior. Guests going from inside the malls to restaurants that have large outdoor areas and such. I personally don't think that the economic development is going to either speed up or slow down our business there. It's a fairly small company that likes to grow organically as and when they find the opportunities. So it's probably something.
I don't know if you want to ask a question about COVID, but so COVID, Hsien did Addictive managed like 2 hours. During COVID, it just dropped because it's an education system, who could get it. So it dropped about 26. Since the opening and since this new year, we've already opened up 7 new outlets, it's one every month, so I guess that review that is
Yeah.
parallel what you're saying. And come the end of, I don't know, I'm a mic killer or something, you know? But come end of this year, we'll probably be at about 41 units, and we do expect it to grow and
Congratulations to that. Yeah, so I mean, to a new brand, right, it's wanting to enter this. Imagine yourself, right, participating in the upcoming franchise show and all stuff. Then you have people coming to you. How then do you know, are you gonna take them on as franchisee? Because sometimes, right, to manage a single unit franchise so far away, it may not make a lot of common sense, especially if the franchisee that you are planning to charge is not very high, right? Then how then do you as a brand, select your initial view, especially if you're not setting up your own management team? Like Hsien, who is the master franchise of SAM, she has a management team. But even if you are not, then how do you advise? How do you select? Because if you go with, a single unit franchisee, and this person may be very new in business or may not have connections in malls or in good locations, then the brand may not flourish, right? And face out more challenges.
Well, from the perspective of the franchise, so what I think it's important for you to understand your own limits, your resources. And like I said before, we can't give single unit franchise agreements. For that, we simply not set up our franchise or team in that run out of Singapore is too small to have many single franchises spread all over the region. Spend a lot of money on hotel and cafes and auditing one partner with one restaurant. So I think, and then obviously finding a master franchisee like you is the dream of many franchises. Someone who goes into the market, sets up strong infrastructure, invests heavily in the market, and marketing of the brand, etc. So if I was to do this again, and I am doing this with other markets, but not so soon with the Philippines anymore, since we have existing partners. But I do with other markets. We were super to go into South Korea, for instance, is to find partners that are willing to commit more to the brand and its development in terms of the number of outlets they want to open, the development schedule behind it, financial capabilities that these partners have. Because, well, you can take the opportunistic approach, right? Start up a couple of nice restaurants in Singapore. And back in 2010, 2012, Brotzeit was a very hot cookie in Singapore, was doing really well, still does, but and then partners would come and say, can I bring this to Malaysia? Can I bring this to the Philippines? Can I bring this to Vietnam? I think what I would recommend to such a group these days would be to be less opportunistic. If you want to go into franchise with your brand, do the homework first, build the framework, build a small team to service these partners. This might all cost money at the beginning because want to take the royalties ASAP, but it's going to bite you in the butt if you end up franchising first and thinking about how to do it all later. So, long story to short answer. I would go for quality in franchise partners rather than for.
Right, so maybe we can open up the floor, for your questions. Yeah, anyone? Yeah, share a little bit of experience, right? I mean, so we got to know this franchisee through the trade show last year. It wasn't a franchise trade show. It was actually a beauty trade show, right? Last year, because of the pandemic situation in Hong Kong, but this time we actually brought the Cosmo exhibition to see. And so we participated in that. And that was how we actually got to know this really good partner that we have right now. Very blessed to know them through that show. And then we also got to know Indonesia through that show as well. And so, after that show, they actually went to try us this Singapore. And then they kept in touch with us. They made the first move and touch base with us. So we had many rounds of like Zoom talks, many rounds before, talk about terms, talk about how we can support them. Then we flew in, then we had a greater talk. And then, we're happy to have them because we realized we share the same faith, right? They are Christians, so it can click very well. And then, and also because of their background, they are currently distributing, the hair care products, outlets, or hair salons in Manila, and seem very confident to be able to open the outlets, right? To their friends or hence, we are very confident. And so, I mean, on our part, we strive to enterprise in the whole, who is very supportive in our venture beyond Singapore. You can reach out to them as well. We have a lot of resources and obviously obviously provide you insights to that market and also connections as well. Yeah. So talk to them. I mean, if it's a, if they think that your company is ready for growth, they will put in a lot of resources. Any questions? Feel free. Go on, has a question for me? Gentlemen.
My question is for Gerhard. For the restaurant business, in the case of Philippines, bearing in mind the GDP and hours, did you is the price point the same over at the Philippines as compared to Singapore? And if it is not, do you tweak your menu and would that cause, I would say, a hit on your brand? Because if you were to change it, the elasticity of the food.
Well, yes, we tweaked pricing to meet the local market a bit. First of all, beverages, beer pricing, etc., is significantly lower over there for the reason that the alcohol taxation is not as high as it is here. So that's one thing. And on the food side as well, they are certainly about 20-ish% lower than over here. But we look at it also from the perspective of the cost of goods sold. So if a simple example, if that pork fillet costs way less there than it does here, it justifies why the retail price to the end consumer can be lower as well. So I don't think this had any impact on our brand in a negative way.
What about in the case like what Chris mentioned earlier in the morning, like in the case of Philippines, they have a sweet tooth. So does it mean that you have to put more, make your steak sweeter?
Yeah, we have such localizations, but besides the flavor, there may also be dishes that the Philippines don't have that we have here and sell it really well. We give this freedom to them after. So at the starting point, you start with a menu that is very much similar to yours, unless the new partner says, I can't sell goose or I can't sell pork leg or whatever it may be. Then we take those items out, and after sort of a testing phase, we go and help to analyze the sales. And we are always streamlining the menu to those things that sell. So we would want to insist on items that are not moving. That's just going to create issues with the cost of goods sold and and make the kitchen operation unnecessarily complex. So we allow for certain localizations as to what they're selling. And to your question about flavors, they're pretty much standardized across the region.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Maybe I'll ask a question. Like, how do you ensure that the sales they are reporting is what the sale is? They could be underreported. I mean, they say in some countries they are 3%.
Well, in the best case scenario, would ask your franchisee to use the same point of sale system that you operate. It's one that you're very familiar with, one that you then have access to, right? So, I think that, along with other IT systems that at least in our industry this applied, is something that's part of the homework I mentioned earlier that one needs to do. The Philippines, for instance, does not operate, can't operate with our point of sale systems because point of sale systems, other than here, are very strongly regulated by the Filipino government. So it must, it's almost like a monetary authority of Singapore, or IRAS, has to approve certain point of sale system brands. So it was impossible for us to have them operate with the same system. Now in F&B, it's critical that every IT system that we're using, be it table management, CRM, loyalty programs, purchasing, and the lot, is all interfaced and sort of interconnected with the point of sale system. Point of sale system is basically the sun and the solar system, the IT cosmos, which affected 2012 for us, it didn't exist, right? So 2012, we were operating restaurants significantly different from today. 2012, you would call up the restaurant, if you remember, and say, I'd like to make a reservation, right? Today, everything is either by a job or through your website's reservation widget. When you come in, I already know who you are, I track your consumption, I know exactly what you like to eat, not how often you visit, and so on. 2012, this was all different. So, your question was different on how do we ensure this? Well, at some point, in our case, you have no choice but to trust that the reports that you're getting are okay. And there are certainly ways, depending on the business, to counter check whether these sales reports are making at all sense. So, basically, purchasing data would help you to understand if the sales data making sense of them.
Because a big percentage of our earnings come from ratings.
Yes, so this is back to the franchise management system. So the particular franchise that we signed up for as everything starts, the entire franchise system was built from scratch, which means that when we first met Samuel, his name was Galex, we already set the franchise system for them, which means everything was built on a digital platform already. And the strategy was to educate each student using worksheets. And each worksheet was serialized. And the kid's name had to be on every worksheet. So part of the training as a franchisee I got was that I need to train my franchisees that each worksheet has to be printed with the right serial number and the student's name on it. And it's done in a specific way so that you can't just photocopy and print, right? Because in education, it is all about the curriculum. So in this particular case, they made it into a part of the entire delivery system. And as a master franchisee, we were taught another step. And that was to educate the parents that if their kids brought home a sheet of paper that did not have the name structured in a specific way, that piece of paper was a copy or there was something irregular. And I don't know if you guys remember in the earlier days when you were to pay for things in the restaurants and it said that do not receive a receipt. I'm still doing that. So you call the HQ, right? So in this case, we teach the parents that if the worksheet that they have doesn't have the right information on, then they might be getting counterfeit copies and to alert us because then we will have to basically make good to them, right? So that's how we actually track our franchisees because 20% of their royalties is part of our revenue and we need to pay our franchisor. So our franchisor is also tracking every worksheet. So there's no escape for us as sandwiched in the middle. We really have to pick up the slack for our franchisees.
One of the things to manage franchise is the consistency in delivering the service for the product. So, with Philippines having 7,000 of clients in your business, spreading 50% like 50% of the line, how do you make sure that quality of teachers and delivery is consistent?
Okay, so during COVID, a lot of it also became an online system. So we then, for the online part, it's easy for us to make sure because the program is such as teacher to student. So we can actually one track performance on the assessments because they're all digital. Number two is also to track the quality of the teachers and program assessing. And also in person, we also send our trainers to our franchisees locations on a touring basis, actually track. Another thing that we track is also the performance of students. So we have like competitions so that they can become big. So one is the outcome, right, of what we're trying to do, which is to educate the kids. So we actually check on the outcome. And then the other thing is we have annual franchisee summits where we bring all the franchisees into play. We get all the franchisees to share best practices. We get them to learn new things. Sometimes we invite speakers from Singapore to give them new nuggets about how to educate the children better, how to motivate the children better. And then we also train the parents. So another thing about, I don't know if you guys have kids, but Singapore math is not really that easy to teach for a parent who was educated in the 80s or 90s, or maybe 80s, yeah. Because the way we're taught math is very different from how Singapore math is structured. So one of the things we do is also educate the parents so that there is also a counter check. Not like FFP where we can check the entire process. We actually have to check the outcome or the delivery of what we say.
Any questions from the floor? Anyone bring your friends? No? My interaction with the Philippine partners very positive. Like what they share. They do respect trademarks and they do respect SOP.
And the good thing about going to the it's not like going to Malaysia where you franchise license, you have to go a lot. There's so much franchise laws. Whereas in the Philippines, it's actually very well covered.
And to get things registered in the Philippines is also easy because English primarily. So, because our business we went into Malaysia, well, we have to also navigate the language as well as the culture. And now we are still working on English, which our consultancy will take care. So just ask us to be information. Yeah, so Philippines is actually really fast. And the lawyers, agents, they are very helpful. Any questions? It's definitely a market worth seriously. I would think so. The GP is actually much more compared to some of the other strategies because we starts, right? Because we were recently flying in a country nearby Myanmar, and when we look at it, it's very small. And how do we price our service there becomes a bigger concern. But Philippines per capita is quite similar in terms of population. Yeah. So how we price our services and usually how the big index kind of like how to price it. If no questions, then we are pass the pen and question. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for the insightful discussion from Gerhard and Hsien. Next up, we have the Director of Kantar Worldpanel Division, who will take regards to online tools. Kantar is the world's leading data, insights, and consulting company, helping clients understand people and inspire growth. Theirs has over 15 years of experience in insight. So she enjoys sharing her point of view and expertise on software and consumer behavior, leading the business development, marketing, knowledge, and transformation for Worldpanel Division. She also has been part of various marketing events and resource speaker for conferences and associations. Prior to this role, she looked after multinational and local FMCG clients, providing growth advice and insights on shopper behavior. In our workshop today, we are going to have her share on a topic, Philippines consumer behavior and insight. Yes, over to you.
Yes, can you hear us?
Very good touch hand. Touch hand.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can hear me well.
Properly.
Let me share my screen.
Match with red. Very good.
Yes, you
job.
can share now.
Match
All right,
with
thank
red.
you. Okay, I hope you can see my screen now.
Expired. Color.
Hold on.
4, 3, 2, 1, card. What? Expired. Orange card. Expired.
Is there any background sound from the side?
5, 4, 3,
Hold on. Let me see if
big, and small.
hold on. I cannot. Let me go back to the main.
Right. Eyes on me. 1,
Okay.
2. You can match with red.
Can you confirm if you can see my first slide?
Yes, yes.
All
We can.
right. All right. Thank you everyone, and I would like to thank PFA for inviting us to share our point of view on the Philippines fast-moving consumer goods. So actually, I think this is a very interesting time for us. I understand that our audience now is composed of very many interesting companies, food and beverage, and also non-food categories. So I think for the presentation, we'll be able to give you some point of view. We'll be able to give you like an overview of what is happening to the Philippines FMCG market. Of course, we know that it's not just the Philippines that's really been affected by higher prices or inflation. We do know that it's also present in many other countries. But what's unique with the Philippines is the growth that we are experiencing. So let me now give you those point of view. Okay, so but before I start, let me just give you an overview of where we will be getting most of the insights. So it comes from our shopper panel. So we have the largest shopper panel in the Philippines. We're able to track 5,000 homes. Those 5,000 households, it's what we use to be able to understand Filipino shoppers, who they are, what they're buying, where they buy, at what price, and hopefully it's more stable now. So it's not just the Philippines that were present, were also present in many countries. And in terms of experience, we've been doing the panel for many years. And I would say that in the Philippines, we have the largest share of the panel. So let me start now. So what you're about to see would be the 12 weekly FMCG spending in the Philippines. And what's very interesting, and I think what's something that we can look forward to as new companies entering the Philippines, Singaporean companies, is that we are finally out of the lockdown. So that's actually in 2022 when we can finally say that we are now out of the lockdown, the pandemic. But again, the new challenge that we're facing now would be inflation or higher prices. I wouldn't say so that it's all too gloomy, because what is actually happening in the Philippines is that GDP is doing very well. We'd say also that in terms of unemployment, the numbers are better, and consumer confidence is slightly better as well. Of course, we do see inflation as some prices continue to go up. But I think what we do see is that resiliency of the fast-moving consumer goods. Why do I say that? Because if I take a look at the different regions in the Philippines, so for all of us here who may not be that familiar in the Philippines, NCR, the National Capital Region, that will be where the highest purchasing power will be. That will also be where more urban Filipino homes thrive, and so higher purchasing power, higher cash outlay can be more expected for NCR, or National Capital Region. The other regions like Luzon, North Luzon, and South Luzon, these are also quite, I would say, very near the capital, or the country's capital, or Manila, and also South Luzon. Visayas and Mindanao, these would be like the islands of the Philippines, but I would say also that they are not far away when it comes to development. So if you take a look at the trended line on the left, you will see that the lines, they're actually steadily growing. So we're now finally out of the lockdown. People are now mobile in the Philippines. When I say more mobile, I would say that more homes, more households are now able to go back to their offices, are able to go back to their normal social occasions, and some of the children are now back to their face-to-face classes. Okay, so looking at the different regions, actually the growth is broad-based. So it's not just the National Capital Region or NCR that we're talking about. We're seeing it also for North Luzon and South Luzon. Now, looking at it in terms of socioeconomic classes, because of course, as new companies, you also would want to know who will be your targets. Would it be the Class ABC1? Class ABC1 would be our upper income homes. Class C2 will be our middle income, the relatively upper to middle income, and the Class DE homes would be our lower income homes. And what we do see is that homes across socioeconomic classes, we're spending more. Relatively for Class C2, it's better because this is where I guess the working class, they're the more less impacted socioeconomic class. Now, you might also ask what categories would be more promising nowadays. And actually, that's a good news because it's broad-based. So shoppers are now buying and spending more across most sectors. And I would say also that this is a result of not just people really being able to afford more. It's more of also the shift of lifestyles. Because we're now able to go out more, we need to accommodate more categories into our baskets. Okay, so that means that prior to lockdown, possibly we're not using a lot of personal care categories, but now we have to use more of it, like cosmetics, like lotions. Before, for example, we're just used to buying a lot of food and beverage, but now we're entertaining also other home care or household care categories. So what's really happening to the Philippines FMCG market is that there are more categories in the baskets of the Filipino shoppers. So if we're about to enter the Philippines, this is a very good time because we're experimenting more, we're accommodating more categories into our budget. Now, I would say also that the optimism that we're feeling is because unlike other countries, our growth for the Philippines is much more than inflation. So we're looking at the different countries here and comparing the price inflation. And what we see here is that the dark blue, the value growth is higher than price inflation. So that would be the Philippines. So we would say that we are in a better place for the Philippines compared to other countries in Asia and outside of Asia. And what we also see is that it's not just concentrated in a few categories. We do see it in a lot of categories. So here is a quadrant of the different fast-moving consumer goods that we track in the Philippines. The upper right quadrant is a very good picture because this is where we see recovery against pre-pandemic and growth against last year. So this is like the steady growth, steadily growing categories. And I would like to probably just mention these categories. So that will be the likes of packaged water, mayonnaise, frozen meats, diaper, flour, baking soda, air freshener, biscuits, crackers, juice, packaged meats, milk powder, bouillon, so the ones that we use for cooking, even wipes, tea, spreads, fresh meats, cooking oil, bar and liquid soap, and fabric cleaning. So if you see your categories here, so I guess it's a very good news. On the other hand, there are also categories that have grown against last year, like rubbing alcohol, instant noodles, canned fish, and cheese blocks. So this is, I think, the categories that are already about to recover. So I would say also that they are in a very good place. So I guess even if I keep on saying that we're in a good place, that people continue to spend more across different sectors, I'm not saying, of course, that it's a totally good picture and it's totally easy easy navigation for us, because what we would like to be realistic about is that shock would be, we know that this high inflation is not here to stay. Okay. If at all, this kind of scenario that we are facing now, the higher prices, it's actually influencing where they shop. So hold on here. So it's influencing where they shop, and even post-pandemic. So I'd like to show you the share of the different channels. So you have here hyper and supermarkets, and then you have here sari stores. So when we say sari stores, so these are provision store, very small type of channel wherein transaction are just made through a smaller window. And sari store would still be the primary destination for Filipino shoppers. So it's the most popular channel. And hyper supermarket, which is modern trade, is the second most popular. So in the Philippines, actually, the most popular would be sari store, or those that are window type kind of stores. This is not surprising because if some of you are not familiar, in terms of the socioeconomic classes for the Philippines, majority would still fall under class B. So it's very important for channels to be able to adapt to this kind of socioeconomic to this socioeconomic scenario. Looking at the right chart, which is the trended line, so you will see here that for sari stores, it continues to go up. And actually, it's impacting hyper and supermarket. So hyper and supermarket actually are being compromised. So you see here that it's steadily softening. And I think for many modern trade outlets, supermarkets and hypermarkets, this is something that they have to be very creative about. How do they make shoppers go to their stores? Okay. So far, let me know if you're able to hear me well, if anyone can confirm before I move on to the next session, next section of my presentation.
Properly, red.
Sorry, I cannot see my chat box at this moment. So hopefully you can still hear me well.
There's
Okay.
some
So
background
what
noise.
can we now expect? Okay, so what can we now expect for the Philippine FMCG market? So these are now the consumer or shopper trends that I'd like to share with you so that you can take advantage of them and so that you can grow when you come to the Philippines. So here what we're saying is that shoppers are actually making trade-offs, and you will see here the trended FMCG spend change, which tells us how Filipino shoppers are coping. So if you see the blue line, so this is where shoppers are actually buying more of the volumes, and the yellow bar would be the contribution of inflation, but actually the light green one would be the product mix. So actually what consumers are doing in the Philippines is that they are coping through product mix. When you say product mix, that means they are trading down in terms of category choice. They could be trading down in terms of pack sizes. So they might probably be shifting to cheaper brands, cheaper segments, or cheaper packs in order for them to accommodate other categories into their basket. Because remember, if I go to the slides earlier, they need to be able to buy more categories because of the shift in lifestyle. So because of that, they have to be able to be creative in terms of their spending for the other categories. So they might be trading down or they might move to a cheaper segment. Now, as brands, what do we then do? So actually, when we were looking at testing the brands in the market for the Philippines, what we do see here is an interesting mix of trading down and trading up. So it doesn't mean that people in the Philippines are just moving to affordable brands, because actually for some brands that are quite premium, it's also growing very fast. The likes of Oreo, Spam, and Ariel, which are more premium priced, we do see penetration growth. When you say penetration, that's the number of people buying or shoppers buying. On the other hand, the more affordable or value brands were able to position themselves also successfully. They're tapping into affordability. So that will be Hansel Crackers, which is a famous biscuit. Happy is a toothpaste brand, and Bioderm is a soap brand, which is also affordable. And what these brands have been doing to be able to target more shoppers is that for the ones that are affordable, what they were able to do was to emphasize the value for money qualities. On the other hand, for the more premium brands, they were able to capitalize into newer variants, and they partnered also with endorsers, the more effective endorsers. The second trend that I'd like to show you would be the rise of private labels. So in terms of what we can see for the Philippines, private label is still very small. So in fact, if I take a look at the chart on the left, this is relative penetration. So this means how many buyers are buying private labels within modern trade only, and it's only 23%, and mostly it's concentrated in paper products. But the recent interesting scenario is that it's also being bought for food categories like frozen meats, breads, and vinegar. And maybe most of you are familiar with this discounter store called Dali. It has already penetrated the Philippines, and right now it has a lot of stores already. And what seems to be working for Dali, I guess, is that they were able to take advantage of the high prices happening in the Philippines. So what they actually ended up doing is because of the price conscious shoppers, they were able to position themselves well. So there are already a lot of Dali locations in the Philippines. So I guess when you come also to the Philippines, possibly this is one, it's two-edged. It can be an advantage for you. It can also be an opportunity for you to be able to offer something better, or something of equal or for the value conscious shopper. The next thing that I'd like to share with you in terms of consumer trend would be modern convenience. And what do we mean by this? When we say modern convenience, we're not just referring to convenience store. It's actually a mix of different channels. Interestingly, for the Filipino shopper, they're not just shopping in one channel, they're shopping in many different channels. So I guess for us companies in Singapore, we're very familiar with what we call omni-channel. So I think in the Philippines, this is also one strategy that you can implement, how to be present in a lot more channels, because Filipino shoppers are very open to not just one channel, but many different channels. Two channels that I'd like to highlight would be convenience stores and also online shopping. And for convenience stores, it's actually growing in terms of penetration or the number of buyers alongside online shopping. Online shopping or e-commerce is still very small in the Philippines. It's quite niche, but I would say that in terms of the number, they've actually grown significantly. So they're now 14% penetration. Of course, we're saying that for CVS and online, even if penetration or the number of people buying continues to go up, loyalty to these stores are still very small because, as I've said, it's still sari-sari store and hyper and supermarket remains to be the top most popular channel. So these are like additional channels that they entertain into their channel repertoire.
Triangle.
And then I'd like to share with you also this trend, which is, I think, one of the things that our partners keep on asking us about. So will people revenge spend in terms of out of home? And the answer is that, well, when we were looking at our food survey study for the other countries where we have this study, well, there's already some spikes, some increases, but I think this is still not the maximum, or still we haven't reached the peak yet. But we also would like to share that in terms of out of home, it probably will not be very high as we expected, as we expect it to be. And why? Because we think that they will still retain their inside the home lifestyle. What do we mean by this? I think for the past 3 years that we were in the lockdown, we have been used to that kind of lifestyle. So it's very difficult for us to totally change our inside the home lifestyle. So I guess for the outside of the home spending, this is something that we really need to watch out for. What will potentially happen outside of the home? So we're not totally dismissing that inside the home will be out of norm. In fact, we still see that in-home spending continues to go up. Okay. The next trend that I'd like to share would be on sustainability. And on sustainability, and I think for us companies in Singapore, we're very much aware of this, and we do take this very seriously. And it's also true for the Philippines. We do see a lot of manufacturing companies taking this trend very seriously because globally, if we take a look at our recent study called Who Cares Who Does, WCWD, there is already a significant number of shoppers who call themselves active. So when we say actives, these are those who really do something about the environment. They do something very concrete. Whereas the considerers, they are like the in-between. They do something. So for example, they go for the recyclable or non-plastic bags, reusable bags, and while the eco-dismissers will be those who totally don't care about their environment. And although it has declined in 2022 in terms of proportion, we actually think that it's still a very important trend that consumers can take advantage of. So if we take a look at global versus Philippines trend, what we can also see is that for the Philippines, although eco-actives is small, we trend. There's a lot of awareness for sustainability in the Philippines. Other local companies have started to do something about it, although we know that it's not, it's a long shot because offering sustainable products, of course, entails a lot. There has to be affordability, accessibility, and those are two challenges that Philippine companies are faced with. Now, let me show you the other two trends beyond food and beverage. I know it's already 21 minutes, but let me do this very quickly. So looking at other trends beyond food and beverage, we do see also the recovery of health and beauty. So I think for us companies who are involved or present in these kinds of companies, it's very good news because before, unlike the lockdown we're in, we were just very conscious about hygiene products like rubbing alcohol, hand sanitizers. Now Filipino shoppers are starting to spend also beyond their daily essentials and beyond hygiene. And interestingly also, because of the pandemic wherein people or Filipino shoppers started to adopt fur babies, we also saw the growth of pet products, pet food products. And of course, in the Philippines, although we are, because we are now facing inflation, this is something that pet food manufacturers have to contend with. So how do they make their pricing more creative? How do they position themselves now that budgets are being squeezed? Okay, so I'm actually down to my last section. Bear with me. So I'd like to show you some very interesting learnings from our brand footprint. And our brand footprint, you might be aware of it because we've been doing it every year. We do this we do this globally, so it's not just in the Philippines. And we study 37,000 brands. So I would say that brand footprint is one of the biggest study about shopper, and it tells us how consumers choose brands and how we can position our brand successfully and get more buyers. So one of the learnings, and I'd like to share it in this forum, is that the bigger brands or the smaller brands have as much of a chance in growing as much as bigger brands. Why did I say that? Because if you take a look at the smaller brands, so small brands here means 1 to 10% penetration. And when we look at the small brands, 56% of them grew. All other brands, 37% of them grew. So if you are an emerging brand coming into the Philippines for the first time, that means there's a lot of room to grow, a lot of opportunity to grow. And how do we do that? So one of the pathways to grow would still be penetration. So when you say penetration, that's as I've said over and over again in the past 25 minutes, penetration is finding new shoppers, new Filipino shoppers. And that's the only way to grow, whether we're talking about a disruptive era or bad times or good times. This is based on our own study wherein we see that, for example, looking at just those brands who grew in terms of penetration, it's 37%. Growing penetration and frequency, it's 51%. So we need to continuously find shoppers. I will just skip this so I can move on to this slide, which is one of the most important insight that I'd like to leave you for this afternoon. If you look at 1% penetration growth, it's worth millions. We can actually get more shoppers by just getting 1% penetration. And how do we then do that? What's a step that we can take? There are 4 ways or 4 strategies. We can do it by being more present. So when we say being more present, it's not just about location, it can be geography as well. So how do we make sure that we're relevant to say not just National Capital Region, but also Luzon shoppers and business shoppers? We can also explore doing more categories. So when we say more categories, we're actually referring to how we can stretch across other categories outside of our own portfolio. We can also innovate by locking in more targets. So when we say more targets, how do we get into the non-buyers? How do we make non-buyers buy us? So probably we can introduce new variants that appeal to a broader range of individual requirements. We can also tap into new needs, create effective and efficient ways to meet them. And finally, be present in more moments or more consumption moments. How do we create new formats or new variants? So here is the ranking for the brand footprint for the Philippines. I guess for us, new companies entering the Philippines, this is noteworthy. So the #1 brand in the Philippines would be Lucky Me. So it's an instant noodle brand if none of you are familiar, followed by Nescafe, which is a coffee brand, Copico, and then you have your Silver Swan, which is a seasonings brand, and Coca-Cola, Bear brand, Surf Maggie. Great Taste is also a coffee brand, and that of Pte. So the brands that are all are coffee brands. So I guess it's safe to say that Filipinos love coffee. The kind of coffee that's sweet, sweet unlike the typical coffee that we know of. So in closing, let me share with you these three things, very simple things that we can take away for this afternoon. One would be that we can navigate the FMCG head or tailwinds. What do we mean by that? There's an opportunity for us to win more shoppers because Filipino shoppers are adding more items that they have previously deprioritized. We also see an opportunity in terms of mobility because we're now on the go. So how do we create growth for the on-the-go categories? And how do we also resonate value and capture where they shop, because it's still the key to win. Recruitment is still king, so we need to continuously grab more shoppers, whether we're talking about big categories or small categories. And finally, there are 4 ways to grow our brand, and these are the 4 levers that I just previously explained, which is about more presence, more categories, innovating, and finally being relevant in more moments or more consumption moments. So that's actually the end of my presentation. Thank you very much. And if you have questions or POV that you'd like to share, very open to hear them.
Thank you, Des. Okay, the floor is open for them.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. I'm fine for the point. The question is regard to earlier that was quite represented about small brands growing more. Can I basically clarify how you define small brand? Is it by the size of the brand in terms of revenue, or is it by the point of the brand used?
Ms. Das, are you able to hear the question?
Sorry, I cannot hear it well. Can you repeat it, please? Or maybe write in the chat box. Sorry, I cannot hear the question very well.
Can you hear me? Is it okay to you?
I think there's some echo in the background.
We'll try to type the question into the chat box.
Thank you. I'll just repeat the question for us. Thank you. I was checking what is the definition of small brand, because one of the slides you mentioned that small brand is more faster than the. So I wanted to ask whether small brand is interpreted as revenue size, or is it by format? Thank you.
Sorry, I really cannot hear it. I think the mic is very far from the. Okay. Small brands, it's 1 to 10% penetration. So when you say penetration, that's the proportion of Filipino shoppers buying the brand. So that will be how smaller brands are defined in terms of the number of shoppers.
We have any more questions from anyone for Ms. Des? Des, thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you.
For our final presentation today, we are delighted to have Galex, Business Development Director, Insight Division at Kantar Philippines, who will also be speaking to us via online Zoom as well. Galex has more than 50 years of experience in research, having exposure at both agency and client side. Galex has partnered with organizations from different industries, from F&B, pharmaceutical, technology, automotive, and finance in understanding consumers and identifying emerging growth trends in their respective markets. Prior to leading business development, Galex is also the Philippine country for Kantar Commerce and Innovation Solutions area. So today, you will be sharing with us on the topic understanding social media and e-commerce potential. Mr. Galex, over to you, please.
Yes, so good afternoon, everyone. So good afternoon, everyone. And on behalf of Kantar, it is my pleasure to be here and to be able to share snapshots about what we know of the social media and e-commerce landscape in the Philippines. So just a quick check. Is my audio working perfectly? And are you able to see my screen?
Yes, you can hear you, can see your slides. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Now, I'll just turn off my video to save on bandwidth. I don't want the presentation to drop, okay? Yeah, so let's start the ball rolling with key learnings on social media and trending marketing and branding digital channels for your consideration if you were to enter the Philippine market. So my story this afternoon will start with an evolved appetite of Filipinos for online media. And as of last year, online media platform usage has actually exponentially grown in the Philippines. So in fact, it has grown at the expense of TV and is now bigger than radio since 2019. So this clearly tells us that back in 2019, if you were to enter the market, the approach was to enter the Philippine market via TV. No questions asked. That was very clear. But as of 2022, it seems to be a no-brainer to also integrate online into the mix. In fact, one can even argue that one can enter the Philippine market using online media solely to engage with target audiences and consumers. Now, the growth of online media consumption was driven by consumption of social media. As you can see here, social media consumption from online video to TV on-demand streaming and general social networking have been tagged as platforms that have grown and at the same time grew among a huge population base. So not only is usage growing, but there is also scale in terms of having high penetration for the platform. And speaking of high penetration, if we look at some numbers here, so 93.8 million Filipinos are active social media users today. And if we were to zero in on social media users, majority belong to the younger segment of the Philippine population. So obviously, if you're, let's say, a brand or a product that's catering to a slightly younger portion of the population, then, obviously, social media online is something that you can strongly consider. Okay? Note as well that there's also hardly any difference between males and females when it comes to social media usage. But I think the story here that we've seen so far, there's a growth in online media usage in the Philippines, largely driven by social media. And not surprisingly, it is Facebook, which is the most widely used social media platform in the Philippines. So based on numbers alone, based on its number of users rather, one can already make a strong argument to anchor a digital marketing strategy using Facebook, right? But you also see that other platforms can also be considered, okay, in our mix. For example, YouTube and TikTok also have a sizable user base in the Philippines. Okay, and while Twitter and Instagram don't have as many users as the top social media platforms here, you still see that they have more than 10 million users each, which can actually come in handy when you use them in tandem with, say, a Facebook, a YouTube, or a TikTok, for specific reasons. Okay. Now, alongside social media, there was also one Filipino digital habit that fueled the growth of online media. Okay, and that is the so-called digitalization of TV viewing. I hope I mentioned that correctly. Okay, but basically, what we saw here is that today there's more than 30% of Filipinos watching content via streaming platforms. Okay, and we also tie this up with the growth of smart TV ownership during the post-pandemic period. Like from 2019, there was only 19% of Filipinos who would have smart TVs. Now it's up to 30% as of 2022. So obviously the habits of watching TV, has evolved. It's not just free to watch or TV or cable TV rather. Now they're also going online to watch videos in TV. Now, given this so-called behavior in the consumption of online media content, like online videos, social media news feeds, video streaming, and social media stories, what we're seeing is actually the consumption levels of these things are already now at TV levels in the Philippines. Okay. So in terms of what they are consuming, you could already make that argument that, oh, there's already a high penetration in terms of online content fueled by social media. And it's at the same levels as TV. Okay. And because of this, so in terms of advertising reach, online channels are actually already dominating the scene. Okay. In fact, apart from online video, the social media feeds, the video streaming, and social media stories, even online games and influencer content have more or less the same reach as TV, as you can see here. Okay. Now, while this is exciting news for us marketers and brand builders alike, and also business people in running businesses, it's also important to understand that there are indications that Filipinos also react differently to advertising on different platforms. Okay, so what do I mean by this? Okay, so based on a study conducted by our Kantar Media Philippines, they found out that different advertising formats are also perceived differently by Filipinos when it comes to serving a specific brand building or marketing purpose. So to cite, Filipinos consider traditional media as sources of more trustworthy content, with influencer content the only online platform making that list. So you can imagine an implication perhaps of this would be if someone wants to really create empathy and connect at a deeper level with their target audience, using online through an online influencer is actually required to do that. Perhaps because a credible source of the information is also equally required by your target audience. Okay. So, and we're also seeing here that the most popular forms of online media are perceived by Filipinos to be for fun and entertainment. Okay. So now to marketers and brand builders, these types of online content can also be useful to catch attention and otherwise engage actively with their target audience here in the Philippines. So basically the point I'm trying to make here is that we saw earlier the explosion in terms of adoption of online social media. Okay, and in terms of advertising, it has actually driving reach as well. However, it's also important for us to understand, or rather to take note of, important for us to take note of aligning what we want to do in terms of our commercial objective with the online media platforms that we want to use. So if it's all about connecting and engaging, so maybe we can consider online mobile games, video streaming, and those things to connect with our target audience. But if we want to create more empathy and to really connect deeper with them, we may need to use influencers so that we will be able to compete with the likes of radio, TVs, and those things. So now let's talk about investments in digital advertising. Okay. So this came from a service that we offer, Kantar Digital Advertising Intelligence. This covers January to June of this year. Okay, so based on what we're seeing in terms of spend, social display or static ads and social video have cornered the lion's share of the spend when it comes to digital advertising in the Philippines. Okay, so for the others, there's hardly any other online content or platform or type that reaches 10%. So it's really just between the static ads and videos when it comes to spending. And there's also no surprises when it comes to who are the ones driving digital spend in the Philippines. So if we take this information, okay, and combine it with the information on social media platform user base I showed earlier, it just simply tells us that the best route to do digital advertising in the Philippines is really through the top social media sites. Okay. Because as you can see here, even the local players in the Philippines, they don't even get to capture even 1% of the spends. That's really cornered by the top social media sites. Okay, now, so let me summarize now what I have shared so far about the social media landscape in the Philippines. So the three main points I really want to highlight would be, first, okay, yeah, so growth in online usage is being fueled by social media, with Facebook and the other major global social media sites contributing to this growth. We also saw earlier that digitization of TV viewing in the Philippines also added to driving online media growth, resulting into online channels now dominating advertising reach in the Philippines. And the third point, display and videos make up majority of digital ad spend in the country, and the top publishers are also the top social media sites. So putting all three together, the message I want to leave everyone with on social media in the Philippines is that content is king. Okay, so as cliche as that might sound, what we are seeing now really is that it seems necessary to do this, if only to reinforce the Filipino behavior of video and social media feeds consumption. Coming up with more unique and relevant content later on will also help us because it will allow us to stand out versus others in the growing online clutter. So that's it for social media so far. Now let me move on to e-commerce in the Philippines and how one can leverage on the performance of mainstream players to enter the market. Okay. Now, let me do a quick plug here. The learnings I will be sharing on e-commerce come from a study we conducted in 2022 called E-commerce On. It's about online shopping habits and motivations. And these are the highlights of the Filipino online shopper shopping habits and motivations. So we will go through this one by one. Okay. So I'll start with understanding who the Filipino online shopper is. Now, it's important to note that global e-commerce trends are always eclipsed by local developments. So to understand the localization of e-commerce, it's important to understand at the beginning, at the onset, who the online shoppers are. And in the Philippines, the Filipino online shopper is mainly the younger shoppers between 16 to 34 years old rather, which is also more or less the same age band as Filipinos who consume consume online media, if you remember our earlier discussion on social media. Okay. And when we look at the actual shopping habits or how they buy online, compared to other countries, Filipinos tend to buy online using their mobile phones. And this behavior tends to be consistent with Indonesia, but as you can see here, the behavior is really different versus developing countries. Okay. In fact, if I were just to pick, let's say, Korea and Japan, they have a healthy slice who buy online via PC. Okay? But comparing that to the Philippines, it's a totally different picture altogether. Now, when it comes to motivations of Filipino shoppers, it appears that they tend to put high regard on assured value for money and convenience, plus feedback of fellow customers are also valued. Okay? And these things are apart from just price and promotions. Okay, which are the two things that actually have the highest average globally when it comes to motivation. So in other words, it's not just price, but a whole lot of other considerations that we need to consider when we want to, let's say, tap the e-commerce market in the Philippines. Okay. Suffice to say, it's important for any e-commerce platform to deliver also non-price value to consumers as well. I guess in the end, if you add everything up in terms of these motivations, okay, it's really all about making the e-commerce shopping experience worthwhile. Okay. Now, when it comes to the actual e-commerce platforms, the landscape of the Philippines is actually very different versus the global landscape. For one, the global leader, Amazon, has virtually no presence in the Philippines. In fact, there's only two names to remember for e-commerce in the Philippines, Shopee and Lazada. And that's it. Then I guess that's also because they're more or less aligned with other Southeast Asian countries like Malaysia and Thailand, wherein Shopee and Lazada are also strong. The same also for Vietnam. Okay. Now, if we look at specific categories that are being shopped in the Philippines, so e-commerce uncovered FMCG and general electronics. For FMCG, across the categories that we covered, what we saw is that Shopee leads as the top retailer, okay, the top retailer that most of these items were brought from. The only exception seems to be beverages, wherein Grab is the one that is most popular among the Filipino shoppers. Okay. In general, okay, Lazada would be next to Shopee. Okay. And you will also notice here that the e-commerce platforms of brick and mortar retailers in the Philippines, so the likes of Mercury, which is a local pharma brand, SM, which is a local mall. Okay, now so these e-commerce platforms of brick and mortar retailers, they're not yet as popular at the moment when compared to Shopee, Lazada, and even to Grab. Okay. The same story also holds true when it comes to consumer electronics. Okay, so for consumer electronics, Shopee is consistently the most used retailer across the categories, then followed by Lazada. Okay. So basically, you can say, in terms of the Philippine market, the ones that are really driving it would be Shopee and Lazada. But while Shopee and Lazada dominate the e-commerce landscape here, we do believe that it is also important for us to take note of emerging global trends in the space. Okay, so for example, one such trend that we took note of is the RGD, which is rapid grocery delivery, which actually accounts for 60% of e-commerce shoppers globally. In the Philippines, Foodpanda is the top RGD provider. And if we were to focus on the Philippines alone when it comes to RGD, what we are seeing here is that close to 80% of Filipinos are already using the service, with the aforementioned Foodpanda emerging as a top provider, with Lastmart and GrabMart emerging as a far second and third respectively. Okay. But I think what we're seeing here is that in terms of this trend, okay, it's actually a trend that is also being picked up in the Philippines. Okay. Now, another interesting trend that we noticed in e-commerce locally in the Philippines is the so-called circular economy, which is basically a fancy term for the second-hand market. So what we found out in our e-commerce study is that, or based on what we know, 34% of online shoppers globally are in the circular economy, with Asia in the lead, with 62% of Asians buying second-hand items online. Okay, emphasis online. And zeroing in on the Philippines, buying second-hand or vintage items is also generally done by majority of shoppers. As you could see here, close to 60% are already doing that practice. With fashion items, home appliances, and digital services or products emerging as the most shopped second-hand vintage pre-loved items in the market. Okay, so basically looking at those two trends, RGD and the circular economy, shows you that there's also opportunities to, localize, okay, e-commerce in certain markets. Okay. Now, this brings me to my last slide for this afternoon. So to summarize, the key learnings on e-commerce in the Philippines are as follows. So the first one is we really need to know who our target audience is. In this case, they are the 16 to 34-year-olds and they buy primarily from Shopee and Lazada. Okay. The key motivation is also not about price only. Yes, price is important, but so are a host of other things that when taken collectively points to making the overall online shopping experience both efficient and enjoyable. And lastly, stay ahead of e-commerce trends so that these can be localized to the market. So localization is key. So basically what I want to leave all of you with this afternoon on e-commerce in the Philippines are as follows. Knowing your audience is one thing, but stereotyping them is another. So it's important that when we want to, when we consider entering the Philippines, we should have an understanding of their habits and motivations, not just who they are. Okay? And we should also resist the temptation to just manage prices or play prices. Don't get pulled into a price war. Make the online shopping experience count. Make it worthwhile. As we saw, the Filipino shopper also has other considerations on top of price. Okay. And lastly, reinforce distinct Filipino shopping habits, such as leveraging on their penchant to buy vintage pre-loved. So thank you, everyone. And if you would have any questions, just type them in the chat box, or you can send me an email if you would want to have a separate discussion altogether. Thank you.
The company presentation. The floor is now open for any questions online. Anyone have any question?
Okay, if there are no questions for now, just feel free to email me and I could also provide you with a copy of my deck and we could have a follow-up discussion.
Okay, thank you, Gerhard. There's no questions for you for now. All right, we have come to the end of our contact workshop. Is franchising the responsibility for the Philippines. So we hope this half-day workshop has given you a comprehensive overview for expanding your businesses by franchising the Philippines. So from now till 3 p.m., feel free to network with other like-minded participants here today, as well as our distinguished speakers like Chris. So with that, on behalf of FLA, we would like to thank everyone again for taking time to participate in our workshop today. Thank you.